As we've discussed during the day and as we've seen the presentations, that it's obviously becoming clear that data is becoming increasingly embedded in the projects that we're working on. But actually what really attracted Aiimi to take part in this event was actually the title of the event itself. So Digital Water Implementing Change Now. And it was very interesting, that last conversation, particularly with Ludmila's view on that cultural change, and that's something I just want to touch on. From our perspective, it's really how can we focus on the impact of change to maximise the speed in which we deliver these programs. There's a huge amount of programs going on, but we know that we need to deliver at velocity to drive out the value of data across AMP7, and we need to do it early in that period to maximise the value that we can get out over the next 5 years. Now, from an Aiimi perspective, we've been lucky enough over AMP5, AMP6, and as we go into AMP7 to have worked with a number of companies and have seen firsthand and delivered a number of data-driven projects across water recycling, customer, employees, so across the business. And data has obviously been instrumental in supporting the delivery of those ODIs across those periods and as we move to performance commitments. The challenge I would make, which supports Paul's statement at the outset of this session, was data is supporting. And in many organisations, there's still a focus on the asset, the employee, the customer as a centric view of solving problems, rather than actually really recognising the high value of the asset, customer, employee data in helping us to overachieve those outcomes. So it's really about understanding how we can change that within the industry. And within the water industry, there is no industry standard of the maturity of all organisations and all the people in the supply chain about how data is being used. Each water company is different. Each member of the primary supply chain are different in their stages of that maturity curve. And in fact, it's not just at the organisational level. I actually think it's a departmental level. So you may have someone who's a head of water who absolutely is bought into how data can be used against traditional methods, particularly when we're trying to do more for less in this period, but you may have someone in water recycling who is not as much bought into that journey. As we move into AMP7, there is a definite drive to look at what we can do and with more. And it's being seen as a key enabler. It's data is referenced by the regulator, it's referenced by water companies, it's referenced by the supply chain. And even as we've spoken today, you're extending that discussion out to open data, which is a further extension of how valuable data can be water. However, I think that there is a cultural blocker that is going to inhibit some of the use of data in water, particularly at a BAU level and particularly in the open data space. There are programs of work that are happening at the moment in this space, but I do think there is some reticence by organisations to throw themselves wholeheartedly into that to potentially drive what could be some really high values. There is a commonality of maturity in the sector of how we deal with data at crisis and incident management. So the water industry is very strong in finding and maximising the value of data. And those blockers that we see at BAU often disappear at a critical data need or in an incident. And often the blockers are not technical, but often they are people-based blockers. I'm sure many of us have identified a data source that could support a driver value-based outcome during BAU. However, when we go on to have the conversation and say, we need to get access to that data, it's going to make a huge difference, we get responses like, it'll take some time to access that data. There are security protocols around that data. The data quality is poor. It won't be worth using that data. You need to speak to X to get access to that data. But amazingly, as soon as a critical incident occurs, the barriers seem to vanish. And this has been hugely visible, I believe, as companies and water companies have tackled the COVID challenge. But I do think it has given a really, really good baseline for how water companies have done that, particularly dealing with vulnerable customers and vulnerable employees. But I actually just want to touch on one example where we've really seen it, and that was actually in relation to the Beast from the East. Beast from the East 2018. I'm sure everyone was affected to it. -6 temperatures to +8. Key case of focusing on key activities. And one of our clients really focused on how data could be used to do that and how data could be used around storage points to ensure continuation of supply to their customer base. Now, when that happened, the breakdown of barriers to enable that data and access to that data, customer data, asset data, to enable us to be able to respond to that was huge. And that in itself enabled us to ensure that we kept our customers whole, as we should have done during that period, whilst working with our client.